cloudy today with fog, showers, and perhaps even a thunderstorm.
Good morning, America. I'm Charles Gibson.
And I'm Joan Lunden. Coming up in our first hour on this Wednesday, March 4th.
I hope you're about half as happy as I am tonight.
Governor Bill Clinton savors his first primary victory.
Shaking up the nation, and we're shaking up the world here in Georgia tonight.
And Pat Buchanan continues to challenge President Bush.
And getting the bugs out. How to rid your home of toxic biological pests. Speaking of pests,
I was waiting for the punchline.
I couldn't resist it. That was
okay.
A cold shot.
We know you didn't mean it. Flooding rains returned to Texas late yesterday and last night, but as the radar shows, these rains were accompanied by violent thunderstorms, and today those storms will move into Arkansas and Louisiana.
It's bad when you can't pass up a cheap trick, you know?
I know.
As you no doubt noted, politics leads the agenda today. 7 states held primaries and caucuses yesterday. 8, actually, if you include American Samoa, the territory. And as the dust settles, the political picture doesn't necessarily get any clearer. Now, to run it down quickly, and Mike Schneider will do this more fully in a moment, Governor Bill Clinton won his first primary, won big in Georgia. Paul Tsongas picked up an important win in Maryland, also won in Utah, and apparently in the state of Washington as well. And Jerry Brown apparently won a primary also yesterday. That was in the state of Colorado. On the Republican side, Pat Buchanan once again rolled up a significant vote, at least when you consider it's against a sitting president. And so coming up in this hour, we're going to talk with Bill Clinton, Pat Buchanan, and Jerry Brown.
Also coming up, the 1920 census, up close and personal. We'll get a first look at the handwritten census records of presidents, generals, and Gibsons.
Yes.
That'll be interesting. But leading the news, of course, this morning, the primary results. And Mike Schneider has that story and the other news of the day from Atlanta. Hi, Mike.
Good morning, Joan. Good morning, everyone. Well, it all happened last night. The Democratic race for president got even tighter. There were primaries and caucuses in 7 states and in American Samoa, and 4 of the 5 major candidates came away claiming victory. Paul Tsongas won 2 primaries, and the right to say that his appeal does reach farther than the home region of New England. First of all, in Maryland, Tsongas placed first there with 40% of the vote, Clinton second with 34%, Jerry Brown a distant third. Tsongas also took Utah. He got 34% of the vote there. That compares to 28% for Brown and 18% for Clinton. Then there were the 2 states that moved 2 of the Democrats into the winning column for the very first time in this political season. Colorado surprising Jerry Brown in a very pleasant way, giving him the edge there with 29% of the vote. He was followed by Clinton with 27, and Tsongas had 26. And Bill Clinton had his big day at long last in the state of Georgia, scoring his first victory of this political season, coming up with 57% of the vote, more than twice Tsongas' 24%. Jerry Brown got 8% in the state of Georgia. As you might expect, Bill Clinton is rather glad to have finally won someplace, and it was the one that really counted for him. Georgia was considered to be do or die. Now Clinton is looking to next Tuesday, Super Tuesday, where he's hoping to make it a one-on-one race for him with Paul Tsongas. ABC's Mike Von Fremd has details on that.
A very tired but satisfied candidate celebrated his first primary victory.
I hope you're about half as happy as I am tonight.
Clinton hopes that what happened in Georgia paves the way for the rest of the South.
Tomorrow we go on to South Carolina, we go on to Florida and the other Super Tuesday states. We go on to embrace this whole country with the message of change.
Paul Tsongas did not do as well in Georgia as some had expected, but he was more than satisfied with the overall results last night, winning in Maryland and Utah.
They said that I was the regional candidate. No, they're right. North, South, East, and West.
In Georgia and the other major primary states, Jerry Brown finished ahead of Tom Harkin and Bob Kerrey. Both their campaigns are bumping along the bottom. Both candidates say they will stay in the race, but one seems a bit more realistic than the other.
I am as confident tonight of ultimate victory as I was on the day I announced back in September of last year.
Where can you win on Super Tuesday?
Nowhere.
Just being honest. Yeah. Why don't you think you can win any place on Super Tuesday?
Well, I'm not known in the South.
Kerry's hoping for a win in the West, something Jerry Brown got last night. But the real results from last night are that this is a 2-man race between Clinton and Tsongas that's likely to be a delegate chase all the way to the convention.
Tom Harkin has been well back in the pack most of the way. He did manage to win finally last night, a straw poll in Minnesota. Jerry Brown had his surprise victory, and that, in a way, was more than just winning one state. It got him an opportunity to keep federal funds coming in, didn't it?
That's important for him. He's going to have more money to keep taking his message, and he says he's going to stay in all the way to the convention.
Now, what do you make of the fact Clinton did win here in Georgia? He won big, but the Democratic turnout, according to Claiborne Darden, who's a well-known pollster in this area, was only 16%. I mean, he was astonished by how low the Democratic turnout was.
There were an awful lot of Democrats that switched over to vote a protest vote for Pat Buchanan. The way most think that cut is that took away from Bill Clinton, the good old boy from the South, and if they hadn't been able to do that, Clinton might have had an even bigger victory here.
All right, Mike, thanks very much. ABC's Mike Von Frem. On the Republican side, now, it kind of looked like New Hampshire all over again. President Bush did sweep all three of the primaries for the Republicans yesterday, but for Patrick Buchanan, this produced another episode of 30-something. In Maryland, first of all, President Bush took 70% of the vote. Buchanan there got 30%. More of the same in Colorado, 67% for the president, 30% for Mr. Buchanan. And in the first primary in the South, Georgia, President Bush getting 64%, and Patrick Buchanan, a rather healthy, according to some observers, a rather healthy 36%. Both candidates are now calling themselves winners, and we're going to go to the White House right now. ABC's Ann Compton is standing by live this morning to tell us about how much of a winner the president really feels this morning. Ann?
Well, the good news, Mike, for President Bush is the protest vote against him didn't get any worse. The bad news is it didn't get any better. But in a telephone call to his supporters in Atlanta last night, President Bush vowed that he would win every one of the primaries and go on to lock up the nomination.
I'm just so grateful to you when you take what we've done in Georgia and then add it to Maryland and add it to Colorado. It's been a good night, and you all did a marvelous job, and I am very, very grateful, and I leave tomorrow for Florida. We're going to work in these Super Tuesday states. So far, we've won every state, and I believe we'll win the rest of them.
At his Atlanta celebration, Pat Buchanan crowed that his forces racked up 37% of the vote in just 5 days of campaigning. It had taken him 10 weeks to do that well in the first primary.
The Buchanan brigades have grown from the tens into the hundreds, into the thousands, and now we're in the tens of thousands. But now, my friends, they got to rise up all over this country. We got 10 battles in the next 7 days. Folks have got to join up. We need all the recruits and all the volunteers we can get across this country.
There's no question Patrick Buchanan did take from President Bush some of those who supported Bush before. And the president said in a written statement last night to those who had been his supporters but did not vote for him this time, he understands their frustrations with Washington. He hopes to bring them home to his camp. Mike?
And it was just about this time yesterday that the White House put out the word the president regretted giving in on that tax increase a couple of years back, that he was pretty much sorry about it. Does the White House think that had any impact on the vote yesterday? And obviously they must have hopes that it will in the future.
Well, obviously it's very difficult to assess what kind of impact it had on voters who were going to the polls at the very time the president made this kind of admission. I think perhaps the real target for that is Super Tuesday. President Bush leaves here within the hour for a sweep across Super Tuesday states, hitting every single one of them. And he hopes that that message, along with the family values and the improving economy, will do the trick by next Tuesday. But I also think the administration's kind of dug in and realizes that there's this 30% vote out there. After all, even uncommitted in South Dakota last week got 30%. They are resigned to that size protest vote until the economy gets any better.
And thanks very much. ABC's Ann Compton live for us this morning at the White House. And that does it for now from Atlanta. Back with more news a little bit later in the broadcast. Let's get back to New York right now, and Joan and Spencer.
All right, Mike, thank you very much. It is 8 minutes after, and it is time for Spencer Christian. What you got on the map?
A little bit of a stormy map today. Texas is hard hit again. Texas was pounded over the months of, I guess, December, January, much of February with heavy rain. Remember the flooding down there? And now the heavy rains are back. So I'll show you what's going on. Joan, we'll take a satellite view of the movement of weather systems in the last 18 hours or so, from late yesterday to very early this morning. You can see violent thunderstorms erupting here in central Texas and up in northeastern and eastern Texas as well, pushing towards the lower Mississippi Valley. These storms generally brought about 2 to 3 inches of rainfall, so there is a chance of some local flooding here. But they also produced large hailstones, strong damaging winds, and some tornadoes were sighted as well. Now, during the early morning hours, we expect these storms to lose their intensity and taper off, but they'll redevelop later today here in eastern Texas, and they'll push up eastward and northward as well. As we go to the big picture, take a look at the forecast for the entire nation. We're calling for heavy rainfall and thunderstorms from about the central plains from Kansas down through Oklahoma and eastern Texas, and then later today eastward into Arkansas and Louisiana. And there'll be a lot of rainfall here storms will be quite violent, could produce some damaging winds and possibly some tornadoes. Most of the remainder of the nation will have much calmer weather, and there could be substantial snowfall as well here in the central Rockies of Colorado. That's a look at the national weather. Here's a look at the weather where you are.
Good morning. I'm Channel 5 meteorologist Rick Mitchell. Your 5-cast for today calls for a cloudy sky with areas of fog. There will be some showers, perhaps even a thunderstorm as well. High today 61 with an east-southeast wind of 5 to 15 miles per hour.
And more of the latest news on the storms coming up in the next half hour. Charlie?
Thanks, Spencer. It's 10 after the hour now, right now. Arkansas Governor Bill Clinton now has a primary victory to call his own, and a very substantial victory it was at that. In the state of Georgia, the governor rolled over his nearest rival, Paul Tsongas, by a 57 to 24% margin. And Governor Bill Clinton is joining us this morning from Miami, where he is already campaigning for next week's Super Tuesday primary. Governor Clinton, congratulations.
Thank you. Good morning.
Inevitably, on these mornings after, the contest aspects prevail over the policy aspects. How would you rate this race right now?
Well, I don't want to get into that. I think it's obvious that the change candidates won, the people that are preaching a message of change. I feel great about the victory in Georgia because it was so massive. No one else has gotten anything close to that kind of majority, and I think it's because we were able to sort out for people who were saying, what about change? But the people who have presented themselves as having a coherent plan for change and presented themselves as outsiders to Washington got most of the votes last night. Senator Tsongas, Governor Brown, and myself. I think that shows that the American people are ready for a dramatic change. The rest of this primary is about who's offering what kind of change. And I've offered a new economic plan for the 90s, the only real departure from what the Democrats and the Republicans have been doing. I think that's what Democrats and thoughtful independents and Republicans will want, and I'm encouraged about the result.
It was a victory certainly of very big proportions in the state of Georgia. But your supporters 2 weeks ago were saying Paul Tsongas won't travel. He is a regional candidate in New England. He won yesterday in the Mid-Atlantic in Maryland, in the Mountain States in Utah, in the far Northwest in the state of Washington. Is it, at least at the moment, are you the regional candidate?
Well, no, I'm not the regional candidate. I also defeated him in Colorado, in a state where I was 12 points behind Senator Tsongas just a few days ago. We got within 6 points, I think, in Maryland, a state where I was 12 or 13 points behind a week ago. We closed the gap by half. Listen, I never thought Paul Tsongas was a regional candidate. When you win New England, even if you live in a town 4 miles from when you win New Hampshire, even when you live in a town 4 miles from New Hampshire, the press bump you get is enormous. I didn't campaign in Utah. I was only able to go to Washington once. He went there 4 or 5 times. I had to focus on the states where the primaries were held, and I'm very pleased with the results.
Governor, there's a lot of Democrats who cheer the fact that Pat Buchanan and President Bush are wailing away at one another. Is there a chance that the two of you, Senator Tsongas and you, Governor Clinton, are going to wail away at each other to the point that it'll injure the Democratic Party come election time?
I don't think so. I think that quite the contrary is true. If we don't make clear our differences with one another, then we will weaken the ultimate nominee by making that person vulnerable to the attacks of George Bush in the fall. That's why, even though I've been through some pretty rough stuff and have had to deal with it and come back from the dead, since we know that the Republicans love those red meat, destruct, divide, distract campaigns, that may not be all bad. And I think that, you know, in good conscience, it would be wrong for me, for example, not to try to point out the distinctions between the kind of change I offer and that offered by my opponents. That is not negative. I think we ought to focus on the differences in our recommendations for the future and how our records reflect that.
Governor Clinton, good to talk to you again. Congratulations on yesterday, and I look forward to talking to you again in the coming weeks. Thank you. On the Republican side of the ledger, Pat Buchanan has once again shown that he can gather some surprising support running against an incumbent president. In Georgia, Buchanan finished with 36% of the vote to 64% for President Bush, and I spoke with Pat Buchanan just a few moments before we went on the air this morning. Pat Buchanan, I heard you last night talking to very exuberant supporters, but to be blunt, the protest vote is still there, but it's not growing, and you lost 3 times last night.
Well, Charlie, I think if you take a look at Georgia, I think we won the campaign down there. We came down there at something like 15% at most. We campaigned against the president. We did extraordinarily well. He didn't have the economic situation he had in New Hampshire. He had to use attack ads and attack surrogates to slow me down. He had to come into the state several times. I think this campaign is winning the war of issues and ideas, and I don't think there's any doubt about it. And last night's showing, which matched New Hampshire in 5 days, not 10 weeks, means we're going all the way to that convention.
Well, Pat, I heard you say that last night, and yet a few days ago on the Brinkley Show, I heard you very bluntly and very practically say, look, at some point we have to win something. At some point it becomes counterproductive to simply be a protest candidacy. Which is it, all the way, or do you have to show something at some point that you can beat the president somewhere?
Charlie, if the president decides to fight all the way to the convention, delegate by delegate, caucus by caucus, as well as primaries, it is very, very problematic how you can beat him. That's right. I have to start winning somewhere, and we're going to look around for some states on Super Tuesday. But it is time, Charlie, that the president himself took a look at exactly what is he winning. All he is holding, Charlie, is the Republican base. Loyalists are voting for him because he is the president. He has the title. I am winning all of the swing votes that Ronald Reagan and George Bush got to give us our majority. Young people, I won among them. I win among union folks. I win among Democrats. I win among independents. George Bush is being reduced to his base, and I think he's got to ask himself why he's continuing all the way to a second term. What does he want?
But did I hear you at the beginning of that answer say, look, if the president contests this all the way through, he's going to win this thing?
I think, Charlie, unless I start beating him in some states and break this thing open as I've felt we have to do, that there's no doubt he is the favorite right now. But if I can start winning a couple of states, I still think he could collapse like a house of cards. In other words, he'll suddenly drop his support level way down below where it is now, and we'll start winning one primary after another, the way Ronald Reagan did in '76.
You have been very careful in the early stages of this to say this is not an ad hominem attack on my part. I don't want to wound the president. And yet a number of Republicans last night were saying that the Georgia campaign turned mean, and mean on Pat Buchanan's part. Did it?
No, Charlie. We ran ads which basically said, here's what George Bush said about funding the arts, what he said about quotas. Here is what he did. There's nothing wrong with that. If you want to take a look at the politics of mean, take a look at some of Mr. Bush's surrogates and what they're saying about me personally. Personally, I think George Bush is a man of character, of personal courage, of integrity, who served his country well, and I will never say different. But he does make promises up there in Washington and not keep them. And he is running a liberal Republican administration, Charlie, that is losing all the Reagan Democrats left and right.
Pat Buchanan, just a few moments before we went on the air, our appreciation to him. Jerry Brown, the prize winner in Colorado, with us in our next half hour. When we come back, some Wednesday morning quarterbacking. We'll be right back.
A few words about Long John Silver's new Add-a-Piece.
Add a filet, Ray. Add some shrimp on the side, Clyde.
Add some chicken filet tummy, dummy. Buy any meal at Long John's and add a piece. Fish for 75 cents, chicken for 65, or shrimp for 35.
Animal home!
A great new way to... Now go for 3 delicious shrimp or batter-dipped fish plus fries, all just $1.99.
Walgreens is having a free-for-all. Pond's new line of cleansing products is on sale, and after rebate, they're free. Always maxi pads or panty liners, free after rebate. Walgreens has Speed Stick on sale, too. The bonus size gets you 25% more free. Just $1.79. And if it's new, Walgreens has it. Try new Vibrance shampoo and conditioner, just $2.99 each. When you're looking for value, look to Walgreens.
Channel 5's Weather School project has made an impact in nearly 1,000 area schools and hopefully helped everyone learn more about our weather, as each weeknight on the Channel 5 News 5 o'clock report, we answer a weather school question. Recently, some of our viewers have started asking weather questions on their own. Now, if you have a question about the weather around you, write it on a postcard and send it to this address. If we use your question, we'll of course give you credit for it. So mail in your question today and keep watching Weather School, only on the Channel 5 News 5 o'clock report.
Prescription drug companies spend a fortune on advertising their products. $1 billion a year more than they spend on research and developing new medicines. When your doctor prescribes medication, are you getting the best drug available or the best promoted one? This week on Channel 5 News, you'll see the results of an exclusive investigation by Consumer Reports magazine. Don't miss Prescription Pushers. This week, exclusively on the Channel 5 News 5 o'clock report.
19 past the hour, as I mentioned a moment ago, some Wednesday morning quarterbacking now, and joining us from Atlanta with some post-primary thoughts is Chris Matthews, former aide to the Democratic leadership in Congress and currently the Washington bureau chief for the San Francisco Examiner. And with us from Los Angeles at an early hour is Bill Bennett, a loyal Republican who served in both the Bush and Reagan administrations. Thank you both for being here. Chris, let me start quickly with you. Parse this out for me. Bill Clinton wins very big in Georgia, but Paul Tsongas wins cross-country. How's it stand now?
Well, it looks very good for Clinton right now because if you look at the calendar next week, Super Tuesday is dominated by southern states, and Bill Clinton won so big here, some 60% to something like 20% for Tsongas, that you have to figure that he's going to do very well as the southern candidate.
But Tsongas didn't contest Georgia.
Tsongas is on the ballot, and I'm telling you, I think look at the calendar next week. Clinton is in great shape to win this nomination within 2 weeks.
Really? Even though it is certainly weighted to the South. I asked him a moment ago if he doesn't look at the moment like the regional candidate.
Well, he doesn't want it that way. He wants to be able to win in the South, but not say he's the regional candidate. You know, he can get it both ways. I think Clinton is going to be the nominee at this point. If you just look at the calendar, Tennessee, Texas, Mississippi, Oklahoma, Delaware, all border or southern states next week. It's going to be very difficult. Bob Kerrey said a few moments ago on the show he can't win anywhere. I think Tsongas can win in Rhode Island and Massachusetts. But look at the rest of those states.
Interesting that you think he could wrap it up that Bill Clinton could wrap it up in a couple of weeks. Bill Bennett, let me turn to the Republican side. Pat Buchanan a moment ago, I thought rather candid, saying that he's got to win somewhere, and he's got to win somewhere pretty quickly.
Yeah, he seemed candid and chastened somewhat. I think, as you said at the top of the hour, Charlie, or someone said it's 30-something. This is, in some ways, the bad news for each side. George Bush has to deal with the fact that 30% or so of people voting in the Republican primaries are very unhappy and dissatisfied with the way things have gone. He's got to get those people back. On Buchanan's side, it doesn't seem to make much difference whether he shows up in a state or not. There's a 30% something protest vote against George Bush anyway. What's the value added? And I think Pat Buchanan's beginning to realize it. I think the most significant thing politically this week, Charlie, is the president's admission that he made a mistake on the tax.
I was going to ask you about that,
tax thing. And now I think that's a good start for him. Now I think he needs to pick up on that, take his initiatives to the Hill, capital gains, term limits, whatever, and a line item veto, and get momentum that way. He's trying to restore that bond that was broken by the breaking of that promise.
Very quickly, let me ask you each to comment on the other party. I'll start with you, Bill Bennett. The Democrats, Bill Clinton and Paul Tsongas, saying mean things about one another in the past week. Are they hurting each other?
I think they are, but that field is now starting to clear out. I think Harkin's gone and Kerry's in trouble. We'll continue to watch this. Again, we like Tsongas being in the race. The longer he's in the race, the more we can use him as a witness against the Democratic proposals in Washington. He's in favor of many of the things we're in favor of.
All right, Chris, let me have you comment on that and ask you if Buchanan and Bush are beginning to hurt each other badly.
I think Buchanan is proving that he's very much at the heart of the Republican Party. Many of the things he's saying out in the stump about quotas, about race, about ethnicity, are the things that the Republican Party has used for the last 12 years to win the presidency. He is basically the Willie Horton campaign part 2. Pat Buchanan is very much a traditional Republican of the 1990s, and the party has been trying to disown him. But, you know, it's like the police inspector in Casablanca. He's part of the party.
George Bush repudiated Duke. Pat won't.
All right, very good. Bill, we'll leave it on that problematic note of whether Pat Buchanan is a mainstream Republican. Thank you both. We'll be back.
Time really does a number on your car. At Mako, we're ready to do a number on your car, too.